What's up, guys? Another PTS patch notes video here, and today we're going to be going over the Warden. So, like I mentioned on the other PTS patch notes videos, I'm breaking this up into separate videos just so it's a little bit more digestible, because this particular patch notes is actually quite long. So I broke it up based on class changes, and then on Elsweyr changes, and then base game changes. So that's kind of how the split is happening here. So this particular video is taking a look at just the Warden changes. I will have links down in the description below for the other classes, as well as the Elsweyr, anything that's introduced in Elsweyr, and any base game changes. All of these videos are explored from a PvE perspective, not really too much from PvP perspective. I'll touch upon it here and there where I feel comfortable, but that's not my main area of expertise, so I highly recommend checking out a different content creator who might be a little bit more fluent in PvP if you're interested in that aspect of the patch notes changes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here with the Warden. The Warden doesn't seem to have quite as many changes as the other initial four classes. Four base game classes, so this should be pretty short compared to those other videos. So under the Animal Companion skill line, Falcon Swiftness, they reduced the cost of this ability and its morph to 2700 from 3511 at base. The ability no longer grants Major Endurance. Major Expedition now lasts 6 seconds, up from 4 seconds. This ability is now considered a rule breaker since it breaks the paradigm of Major Expedition lasting 4 seconds. So this basically is just a cost reduction, and the Major Expedition lasts for 6 seconds, so a little bit of a buff for PvP overall. Not going to change too much in PvE because we don't really use this ability too much in PvE. Scorch, this ability and its morphs can now be blocked. More of a PvP stuff and less of a PvE things, because mobs don't block things in PvE, at least bosses don't block things. So this is going to be more for PvP, obviously. Under the green bound skill tree, Corrupting Pollen, this ability no longer applies Major Defile to enemies for 4 seconds inside. Instead, up to 6 enemies inside will be properly affected by Major Defile, which will cease once the ability ends or they leave the radius. So overall, a bit of a buff to anybody who uses the Corrupting Pollen morph in PvP for that Major Defile. Harvest, they fix an issue where the synergy would not actively update to targets in the area. It will now operate like other synergies, prioritizing the closest players to the center of the area of effect place. Also increase the radius of the synergy prompt to 5 meters from 3 meters to allow for more accessibility. So this is the other morph of, I forget what the base morph is called, Budding Seeds, I think. So now you have that synergy going, and now it's just going to be prioritized a little bit better. So it'll you have to get a synergy, now you have to be a little bit closer to the center. It's not going to be changing too much for PvE, because healers typically will be placing this on top of the tank, which you want to do because they get the synergy from Alclash. But now you have a little bit more leeway as to where you place it now, with the radius of the synergy prompt increasing a little bit. Lotus Flower, they increased the radius of the heal from this ability and its morphs to 28 meters from 12 meters to aid in better distributing the healing potential to group members. Bit of a buff to anybody who's using this skill here. Nature's Grasp, this ability and its morph now scale with your highest defensive stat rather than just your max magic and spell damage. This is going to be a buff to Stamina Wardens who might use this ability or think about using this ability in PvP. Now, under the Winter's Embrace skill line, Arctic Wind, they increased the heal over time from this ability and its morph to 3% of your max health, up from 2%. These abilities will now properly rank up in healing with each rank, and their tooltips state the actual heal value. The Arctic Blast morph, they increased the travel speed of the projectile so it's similar to Destructive Touch's speed. They also updated the tooltips to state it requires an enemy to cast. Polar Wind, they increased the radius to 12 meters from 8 meters for the allied heal. This is generally speaking going to be a buff to Arctic Wind, so Arctic Wind heals for 10% base, and then it heals for additional, in this case 3% now, for, I believe it was for 5 seconds, or it might be 10 seconds. I'm blanking on the exact duration, but this is going to be a slight buff overall to Warden tanks. Now your burst heal is going to remain the same, but the heal over time is going to be a little bit stronger. Crystallized Shield, they remove the cost reduction rank up from this ability and its morph. They will now all cost 3780 at base. The size of the shield of this ability will increase as the ability ranks up. He adjusted the magic return to be 22% on the ability's cost instead of the previous base value. For Crystallized Slab, they increased the damage return of this morph by approximately 55% to put it on par with similar abilities such as Dragonfire Scale or Inferno. So this is going to be a overall buff if you're using crystallized slab. So this is probably more for PvP. For PvE, this is going to be a little bit of a nerf just because you're using more magic now to use it. But this is still probably going to be pretty useful overall. Not going to change too much for PvE. It's going to be more for the PvP with the crystallized slab now doing more damage. Frozen Gate. This ability no longer becomes cheaper as it ranks up. The base cost remains 29.70 at all ranks rather than decreasing to 27.01 on the morphs. The duration has been streamlined to 30 seconds on all morphs. This ability now ranks up in damage, but has had its base damage reduced to their AoE standard attack. Its rank 4 of each morph will reach the same damage as before. So this is going to be a little bit of a nerf again, because now it costs a little bit more to use, but you shouldn't really see that big of an issue in PvE or in PvP really. Impaling Shards, they fix an issue where this ability and its morph are being removed before dealing their last tick of damage. They fixed an issue where these abilities were being calculated as direct damage rather than damage over time, and then they updated the tooltips of these abilities to mention their increased chance to apply the chilled status effect. Impaling Shards and Gripping Shards, they increase the damage dealt by these abilities by 30% to put them on par with other AoE dots such as Winter's Revenge. And in Winter's Revenge, they fixed an issue where this morph could snare enemies through walls. So this, generally speaking, is going to be a buff overall, so you do get that last tick back on certain occasions, and now it is buffed on Thaumaturge rather than Master at Arms. The Gripping Shards is going to be a buff, but Winter's Revenge doesn't seem to be affected all too much by this. And finally, Sleep Storm, which is the ultimate, reduced the potency of the snare from this ability and its morphs to 40% from 70%, so this is a nerf overall to PvP, where this is going to be most often used. So again, pretty short list for Wardens compared to the other 4 base game classes. So overall, it does seem like Wardens are more or less along the same spots where they have been. Maybe a little bit of a overall buff to healers and tanks, but for DPS, you're kind of staying at the same spot from a PvE perspective. So Wardens, still no love on this patch. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative, and again, links in the description below to both the patch notes in its entirety, so you can read that at your own pace, and the other videos exploring the changes to the other classes. Again, hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.